Hello, welcome to 20th Century Adventures Artifact of the Week. This week we're going to look at one of my favorite artifacts, my 1912 Ford Model T. Now if you've watched any of my other videos, I'm sure you've seen this car before, but I really want to showcase it. There's a lot of cool things about it. Ford started making the Model T in 1909. He really hit upon a good thing. It was simple to drive. It was intuitive for people who had only driven horses and buggies. So it was really easy to learn. It is not easy to learn for a modern driver who's used to modern cars. But this car revolutionized America. The Model T was affordable. It put automobiling in the hands of the ordinary middle class. Just about anyone could afford one of these. They actually got cheaper as time went by. Ford knew how to source materials, and he adopted the assembly line. He didn't invent it. People think he invented the assembly line. He didn't. He took the idea from somebody else, but he perfected it. He was really good at taking decent ideas and refining them into great ideas. So for a while, Ford hand-built their cars just like everybody else did. So they would have a crew that was assigned to build this car, and that crew would work on assembling the whole thing until everything was done. This is the last of the hand-built cars. 1912 was the final year for that. 1913 they implemented the assembly line, and they could roll out cars a lot faster because this person is doing this job all the time on every car. He's putting on the headlights or whatever. And then the next person does the next thing. Prior to that, they would have a team of 6 guys that would build the whole thing. This car is kind of a transitional car. So if you're familiar with brass era Model Ts, you'll notice that the cowl lights and the headlights are what they call black and brass. So it's got brass and it's got black painted steel. This came out in 1913. This car was made in August of 1912. So presumably by that point Ford had already used up all of the all brass pieces that were going on the 1912 model cars. So he was using the new stock because he'd run out of the old stock. And that's common. You see a lot of cars in this period that, especially with Ford, where it'll be all the right body style and everything, but there'll be one little thing that's off. Now granted, these cars have gone through an amazing history and survived 2 World War scrap drives and all kinds of stuff. Remember, brass makes bullet casings, so a lot of these brass era cars got destroyed. And you'll see a lot of them put together out of parts of other cars, and we call them part salads. So it's a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Sometimes you'll see brass era stuff with post-war black era stuff, and so on and so forth. Now I want to talk about some other myths involving the Model T. The joke is you can get it any color you want as long as it's black. So to some extent that's true, but only for certain years. The black era begins in 1916 and goes up to 1925. During that time, Model Ts were black from the factory because the black paint dried faster. So it was more economical in time, not necessarily materials. Paint cost the same, but the time that the car had to sit and dry on the line was shorter if it was the black paint. So they all got the black lacquer paint. However, prior to that, so we're talking 1909 to 1915, they did come in colors. And of course, anybody could buy a Model T from the dealership and specifically ask for a color, and the dealership would paint it. Or they could have an aftermarket shop paint it. So there were a lot of Model Ts that were not black because people said, hey, I don't want a car that looks like everybody else's. But in this period, these cars actually came in colors from the factory. Ford had several colors that they use, and it was you got one color. You know, it wasn't like you had 6 colors to choose from. That came in later. In 1926 and 1927, Ford did offer a range of colors. I think there was a red, there was a like a camel tan color. I think there was a dark green. Those colors were available as options. By 26, this car was very outdated. The Model T in general was very outdated. It still used the same driveline system basically from 1909 to 1925. There's very little change in that period. So Ford was trying to update and get with the times, and so 26 and 27 are what we call improved cars. They're a little bit better in a lot of different ways, but my heart is with these early cars. So anyway, this car was probably one of the last ones to be built in the factory by hand, and it probably came in navy blue. In fact, I know that it did because on the 4 doors there's a little bit of blue paint underneath this, and you can still see the original paint. So it was a blue body with black fenders. That's what it would have been originally. Now this car was restored in the 1950s, I think around 1951, and so that's when it was repainted black and got the red wheels. It probably would have had black wheels originally. So my goal long term is to take it back a little closer to what was original. I already have a blue car with black fenders, so I'm probably going to opt for the aftermarket paint job. I'll probably go with a different color, not necessarily black, because again, Model Ts are always black, and it'd be nice being a color era car to have a color, but navy blue with black fenders isn't necessarily going to thrill me. So I'm going to look at some options that were appropriate to the period. It would have originally had white tires. At that time, tires were white. It's got black tires on it now because they last longer. They learned that during World War I. They were trying to get more out of the rubber, and they put carbon in it and realized, oh, that really makes the rubber hold up better. And so ever since then, tires have been black for the most part. So to kind of put things into perspective, this car was made a few months after the Titanic sank. So that kind of, you know, puts it into perspective, mind-blowing just how early this car really is. But also, 1912 was the year that Oreos hit the market. So so that brings it back home a little bit. It is going to get some repairs. I have a new top and side curtains on the way for it, and I've got a new radiator coming for it, because this radiator is a little questionable. It's not terrible. I've done some patching to it, and it functions, but it's got a few tubes pinched off, and I think it'd be better with a better radiator. And this one's starting to crack from stress in a lot of places. So things you have to do in order to keep these things on the road. Also, it's slated to get safety glass in the windshield, because right now it still has the plate glass. Eesh, that's scary. So it is going to get new upholstery. I am going to go back with leather, which is what was originally on it. I'd love to save the original upholstery, but it literally is just crumbling in the hands. It's so dry rotted. So it's time for that to go. It does have the 4 doors, which is really special. This was the first year that they came with doors, and this is a real door. That side has a fake door on it, and you could take them off, kind of like a Jeep. You could take those off for ventilation. And a lot of people later on, when they were restoring these cars, thought they looked better without the doors. Made it look earlier to not have the doors on it, and so a lot of people threw away the doors when they were restoring these originally. And so it's a miracle. And this one actually was restored without the doors. The doors were not restored with it, but they were kept by the original, the second owner, I guess. And when I was able to get a hold of it, they still had the doors with it. So when I restore and repaint, it's going to get the doors done as well, and those will stay with it, because there's nothing cooler than keeping it as original as possible, within reason. I mean, we have to worry about some safety issues, such as the glass in the windshield, and mechanical issues such as the radiator. But as much as possible, it's going to stay original. But before anybody says, hey, they're only original once, I realize that, but remember that this was restored in 1951. That's when it was painted black. So this is not the original paint job. So it's okay to restore this one. If this was a really nice condition, all original car that had never been repainted, which is almost a unicorn when it comes to Model Ts, then yeah, I would look at it differently. But this one has been restored before, so it's time to do it again. So anyway, that's about it, and I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, give us a like and subscribe, and we'll see you down the road.